Well, hey, Cavaliers fans, it's time for another edition of the Cleveland Cavaliers on SI podcast. It is episode 2, and just like that, basketball season already in full gear here in Northeast Ohio. And with that, the Wine and Gold getting their season off to a good start north of the border with a big 136-106 win over the Toronto Raptors. John Rudder joined alongside of Tommy Wild here as we break down that game on opening night. A lot to like from the Cavaliers after that first win. And we look forward to Friday night when the Cavaliers open their home portion of the schedule. And there will be a familiar face behind the bench when the Detroit Pistons arrive in town. Tommy, we talked about it, and we were talking about some thumbnail titles about you have to like what you saw from the Cavaliers on Wednesday night. We expected some more offense with Kenny Atkinson now installed as the team's head coach, and boy, did they deliver in game number 1.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that since Kenny Atkinson took over, we've heard so much of him talk about the offense. We've heard so much about what this team's going to look like. And, you're still just kind of hesitant to see, like, all right, what is this actually going to look like? As all of this stuff that we're talking about with the fast-paced offense, is it actually going to come to fruition? I think last night was a great example of, yes, it is. This Cleveland Cavaliers team may have a very similar roster as they finished last year with, but it is a different look in terms of scheme, game planning, and it's going to be a fun season watching this team for sure.
Going to be a fun season watching Evan Mobley develop as well. We've kind of watched his progression over the last several years. It's really hard to believe, too, and I was kind of looking at this as I was putting together the game day report. Just 23 years old, but he's already entering that 4th NBA season. Kenny Atkinson, one of the main reasons that the Cavaliers turned to him was he has a long history of developing younger players, and the Cavs are really trying to unlock Evan Mobley as an offensive threat. A big night for him on opening night, and again, more of what you like to see from the big man. I know Kenny wanted to get more threes up from Evan. That was a priority and is going to be a priority moving forward. I think from what I saw from the box score, he was maybe 1 of 2, so just a couple of threes that he attempted. But the threat certainly there, and that's something that the Cavs are going to want to capitalize on throughout, or really emphasize on throughout this young season.
Yeah, and I think not just with the three-pointers, but he led the team in field goal attempts. That's something that I think I read that they had happened 3 times all of last year that Mobley led the team. And listening to Atkinson talk about, like, this is their game plan. This is what's going to happen from now on. And I think that's so refreshing to hear, as someone who, as fans, we've been saying it for so long, so we got to get the ball in his hands. He's only going to develop with the ball in his hands. There's no other way around it. So I think finally starting to see some of those things that a lot of fans maybe have been asking for a long time or wanting to see for a long time. It's just one game. We can't, get too caught up with, everything. I know it was an exciting game. There's a lot of great takeaways, but there's definitely something different in terms of game plan. And it's refreshing to see. I'm just going to say that it's refreshing to see.
It's interesting to see, too, the 2 trajectories of either of these teams. I brought this up in that pregame report. These 2 teams met 2 years ago on opening night in Toronto. It was Cavs versus Raptors. We had the storyline of Evan Mobley and Scotty Barnes. Those 2 went at it for Rookie of the Year. Obviously, Scotty Barnes coming out with it. Would Evan have a little bit of, want a little bit of payback there for that? Maybe you had the snub there. And since then, the two teams are really on different trajectories. And that Raptors roster really looked a lot different back then. Scotty Barnes, probably one of the only familiar faces that a lot of Cavaliers fans might remember from that team. But what I liked, we'll touch on, the trajectory and the teams, but you were talking about Evan too. One of the things that I really liked from him, and I saw several clips of this on social media too, the aggressiveness. I've been asking everybody what they thought of him physically, because a long, lanky guy at 7 feet. He's been trying to put on muscle and add weight as well. But it looked like he was more sure of himself physically. There were a couple of one-on-one matchups that I saw with Scotty from that night. And Evan was really able to assert himself physically, which I think is going to go a huge way towards him really taking that next step offensively.
Well, I think that what you said about him being physically stronger, I think that goes for both sides of the ball, offense and defense. We all know he's been a fantastic defender, and a lot of that defense has been, the skill set of like timing up blocks or, being able to pickpocket, his defenders and everything. And that's made him such a great defender. But adding that extra layer of physicality on top of all that, it's just going to take him to the next level on defense. And then also on offense, like you said, inserting himself inside the paint. I can't even tell you how many. It seems like he was always dunking the ball right in front of the. I don't know what it was. I feel like every time I looked up, there he was right underneath the basket. So, and I think that has to do with his physicality without the ball as well. Like, I'm going to get to my spot.
Yeah.
I'm going to get here, and it's going to be up to the defender. It's your turn to try to fight back against me, because this is where I'm heading, and that's just going to take his whole entire game to the next level.
We've talked about depth as well. We touched on it a little bit. Spence and I were on the other night on one of the post-game shows for one of the pre-game shows, for one of the preseason games, rather. We were talking about what's this team going to look like depth-wise, and I brought up Caris LeVert's name because we haven't really talked about him a whole lot in the preseason so far and really leading up to him. But what a night for him as well. I believe he came off the bench, 19 points. He was 8 of 9 from the field. And I feel like I was trying to figure out a way to describe this when I was in the car driving to work this morning. Like, Caris LeVert is a guy who's going to have a significant role on this team. And I feel like maybe where he is at right now might be the perfect niche for him. If he's a guy that you're relying on as far as like a starting lineup, for him to contribute maybe on a nightly basis, I feel like that's when the performance maybe wax and wanes for him. But when he's able to come off the bench, be that ball dominant guard, be a primary scoring threat, it seems like this might be the perfect situation for him. And again, I know it was one game, but it seems like he's really set up to flourish in that role right now.
Yeah, and I know that unfortunately, when Max Strus, when that announcement came out that he'd be out the 6 weeks with the ankle sprain, those are immediate thoughts for, who's going to fill in that starting lineup. Is it going to be Caris LeVert? Is it going to be Dean Wade, which it ended up being? Would it be someone like Isaac Okoro, who we've seen start at that 3 before? And right when that happened, I feel like there was this, okay, yes, Caris LeVert could be in that position, but even Kenny had said it a little bit too, like, Dean is a little bit more of that like low usage guy, not in a bad way, just more of a, he can make things happen when he doesn't have the ball in his hands. He can cut and everything. But I think, like you said, Caris LeVert's role is perfect when he's playing as that 6th man. He's coming off the bench. He's kind of taking that primary role of scoring. I think that his passing game is honestly a little underrated. I think that he does have that in his pocket when, there are people or players getting open around him. But yeah, I agree. I think he's going to be that perfect 6th man going into this year, especially as they're still dealing with the Strus injury as well. He's going to provide that nice spark off the bench. You bring up a nice point about the depth, and that kind of want to going back. I know it's only one game. All right, I'm trying to stress to myself it's only one game, but one piece of the depth that really stuck out to me last night, which I thought was a fantastic sight to see, was Ty Jerome playing so well, being that playmaker off the bench that honestly I feel like they were kind of missing a little bit last year. He looked so good last night. I think he finished with 14 points. Had the 3rd or 4th highest plus minus on the team, which, take that stat for what it is. But again, he looked so good. And I think that piece of that depth piece, having that extra playmaker off the bench who can also run the offense alongside Caris LeVert, that was something that was missing last year. Craig Porter Jr. did a good job in his rookie season, but it was still his rookie season. He still does have some development to go. But Ty Jerome's been there. He's been with the Suns. He was with Atkinson with the Warriors a few years ago, so he's familiar with his game plan and scheming. So if Jerome can stay healthy, I think we can say that he's going to be the team's X factor to start the season, just based on everything, all of his experience he has as an NBA player, but also playing with Kenny as well. And we saw that last night.
Yeah, all 13 players who suited up Wednesday night were able to score. And I also saw a stat courtesy of Joe Gabriel, Cavs.com. Wine and Gold's second unit combining for 64 points on 25 of 35 shooting. I know we did a lot of work and a lot of coverage a couple of years ago about depth, and we were anticipating that being a strength, and it didn't necessarily turn out to be that way. And which was one of the reasons why the Cavs went out and added Max Strus last year, which is one of the reasons why the Cavs went out and added George Niang last year. And we're starting to see that depth really come into its own here. Obviously, that's going to be key because throughout the course of an 82-game season, you're going to have those injuries. And lo and behold, we're dealing with one here on night one with Max Strus and Amani Bates as well, if you want to lump him into that category. But it was good to see those guys get those opportunities. in a game. And one of the things that I really liked from Wednesday night was the fact that they jumped out to a 20-point lead and never really looked back. There were times over the past couple of years under JB
Mm-hmm.
Bickerstaff where they would maybe get a lead and let it slip away. Or how many times did we see the third quarter be a problem? Whether it was shooting or defensively, they would have those laps. That was a dominating performance from start to finish, and you really noticed that on Wednesday night.
And I think that needs to be a message, not just, certain games. I think that needs to be a message for the entire season. Put your foot on the gas and don't slow down. I know sometimes teams, go through their waves of like, this is where we play really well. We can maybe take a couple steps back here and there. But I think the message Atkinson just needs to give this team is like, put your foot on the gas, don't look back. We're going to play hard all 82 games and ride into the playoffs with a nice winning hot streak. I know we have 81 games to go before the playoffs start, and hopefully Cavs are in that situation where they're playing again. But I think this team's going to be the best when they're playing downhill, and that's not just in certain games. That needs to be a message throughout the entire season.
It's almost like the Stephen Vogt school of thought, right? I mean, he started out game one that they were going to play playoff baseball, and that was their brand of baseball throughout the season. And of course, that was something that he was praised for early on in the season, maybe criticized for once they hit a little bit of swoon there late in the season. But ultimately, that seemed like it paid off in the end.
Well, you know what? I mean, game one is just as important as game 82. I mean, one game is one game, whether you win it the first game or the last game. I do think there's something to be said for if you get out to a hot start, you can almost give yourself this little blanket to lean back on. Like, all right,
Sure.
like we had a 10 game. We won 10 games by the time it was the middle of November or whatever it is. I think there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't, you can't make the playoffs in October, but you can
Right.
certainly set yourself out to be outside of the playoff picture. And
Absolutely.
whenever you're able to bank some of those wins early, that makes your life a lot easier because you're going to
Mm-hmm.
inevitably hit those struggles, whether it's shooting, whether it's performance, whether it is injury. I've been hearing the story, or I've been hearing the saying, the phrase in the hockey world a lot. You can get early, or it can get late early, or it can get
Mm-hmm.
late quick here, and you don't want to find yourself in that situation. So it's good to see the Cavaliers come out and step out with their foot on the gas. We've talked about Kenny Atkinson a lot. The Detroit Pistons are coming to town on Friday night, and they will have a familiar face in JB Bickerstaff. I talked with Spence, and I asked him this question. I'll ask you this question too. We saw the Pistons in the preseason. We saw some of the bread and butter that we know that JB Bickerstaff is going to bring. What do you anticipate seeing from those guys on Friday night? And maybe JB might have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder when he comes into Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse on the other bench.
Even if they don't admit it, there's got to be some
Right?
sort of,
Yeah,
a
you almost
little
wish
bit of
they
like
would
an
admit
extra
it.
little bit. No one's ever going to come out and say, "Oh, we want to smoke our old head coach." No one's ever going to say that. But in the back of their minds, they've got to be thinking it a little bit, just a little bit of extra motivation early in the season. Play for something, at least show yourself that, this was everything JB did. I thought he did a good job with,
Sure.
the 5 years that he was here, but obviously that it was maybe a little bit, it was time to move on, different voice and everything. They're not going to admit it, but you've got to think that there's a little bit of extra chip on their shoulders heading into this game. And I think the same can be said for Bickerstaff. I think that
Yeah.
he's not going to admit it, but he's going to want his guys to play a little bit of extra defense coming, back to Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse for the first time. He's going to want his guys to be playing hard, and he wants to win this game just as bad as Cleveland wants to win it too. But again, I'm not expecting anyone to come out and say that themselves.
I know I like in today's sports media landscape, like the journalist in me sometimes wishes that because we get so many
Mm-hmm.
bland answers. When you
Oh
do get a
yeah.
moment of transparency, you really do appreciate that much more. And I don't see any of that to denigrate or hate on JB
No,
Bickerstaff
not at
because
all. Not at
you're going to be
all.
hard pressed to find a better person to come across. But every coach comes with an expiration date, and I think that JB kind of hit his in Cleveland, and it was it was time for them to maybe explore a change and move forward. I think that with how they handled the roster in the offseason, and obviously their coaching search and landing on Kenny Atkinson, it was kind of clear that they felt like maybe coaching was the key for them taking the next step. So I'm anxious to see that. I think that that's going to
Mm-hmm.
be a good atmosphere. Obviously, it's the home opener. It's going to be a good atmosphere anyway down there at the field house. But I think that adds a little extra juice. And when we talking about finding ways to get up throughout an 82 game season, that's an easy way to find a
Absolutely.
reason to care through an early season, an early game in the season on the schedule where you find a little bit of way to you find a way to find a little extra juice on a night like that.
There's a hard hitting question for you, John. Does JB Bickerstaff get a tribute video?
I think that he does. I think that
I think so too.
I think he does. I think that the Cavs, they are, your quote unquote first class organization. There wasn't any
Yeah.
malice. I think Kobe had
Mm-mm.
nothing but good things to say about him. I think Donovan's even had some praise for him in the offseason, saying that Detroit's going to become a better team under JB.
Which I think is
JB's a
true,
good coach.
honestly.
Like I said,
Mhm.
I don't say any of that to denigrate him. I think that it was just time for them to part ways and explore other opportunities. So I think he'll be good for that group up there in Detroit. I think that he will get the tribute video, and I hope that
Mhm.
everybody in Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse gives him a nice standing ovation when he gets it on Friday night.
Whoa, Cleveland fans giving away. Ooh, touching a touchy,
Right? I was going to
touchy
say
subject.
with the tension that we have between fans and the Browns right now, it'll be nice to see
Seriously.
team and fans
Uh,
come together, because
don't
boy,
boo
is
him.
that a hot
Don't
topic that you
boo
really don't want to touch with the
him.
pole, right? Oh my.
Uh,
And we talk about as we look forward to that matchup on Friday night. I haven't had a chance to dive into injuries again. Like, obviously, Max Strus going to be out. Amani Bates still
mhm.
dealing with the knee injury. I wrote this too for that pregame report, and I said it tongue in cheek. And when I kind of wrote it tongue in cheek as well when I did it in the video, and then lo and behold, I open up Twitter and Serena Winters asked Darius Garland about it. But it was good to see them get out of there without any injuries, and thank goodness
Yes.
Darius Garland did not get hit in the face again.
Seriously, because we know that unfortunately he's going to get hit in the face at some point this season. So let's just push that down the road a little more. Yeah, I mean, I also think it's something to be said for, your starters only played like 26 minutes,
Sure,
27
yeah.
minutes yesterday because of how much of a blowout it was. But I don't know. I think that's a good, start the season off. Don't need to be playing guys 40 minutes a night. And on top of that, coming out with no injuries, obviously that's a plus, because we've seen how quickly injuries can derail a season. So start off clean and head into the home opener with everyone available,
And I
except
think you brought up a really good point too about the usage, because early on in the season, years past, Donovan, I'll use Donovan as the example because he
yeah,
was like the shining candidate. His usage was way up early on, and there was a lot of talk and debate about how many minutes he was playing, if he was being overused. But I mean, those minutes counted, and he was being an effective player and a useful tool for the Cavs. Like, they were playing in some close games. It wasn't like he was playing in a blowout. So it was good to see them have, a cushion like they had on opening night, get those guys some rest, because Lord knows they're going to need it. And it was good to have it in a situation like that, because Donovan's a guy that, like, he's never going to say, take me out, that he needs the rest. He's going to
right,
be chomping at
right,
the bit to get in there. But it was good to see them get that rest on Wednesday night. Again, I know it's one game, but take it while you can get it.
right. I mean, I just looked it up. Donovan Mitchell last season averaged 29, about 30 minutes a night, which was sixth in the NBA. So I think that we go back to this conversation about depth, use the depth, right? Use that depth if you have it. I mean, and Kenny's talked about playing 10, 11 guys. I don't actually think that's going to end up happening as the season goes on, the full rotation. But at the beginning of the season, when guys are still trying to get back into a swing of things, there's no reason to be playing guys, 35 minutes a night, unless it's a close game. But, there's always the situational stuff. But yeah, Donovan Mitchell, 29 minutes last night, or 29 minutes a game last season. Yeah, definitely nice to see those guys get their work in, sit out, the fourth quarter and get ready for Friday.
I want to ask about Jarrett Allen too, because I talked about him early on in the preseason. Early on, 14 points from Jarrett. When I'm looking at the box score, I feel like I'm almost disappointed when I see that he doesn't have a double double. It's like 14 points. I think it was 7 rebounds or 8 rebounds total. Nine, 7 rebounds for him. I feel like that's
I know what you mean.
you just kind of come to expect that from him, right?
Yeah. Yes. Going back to the usage thing, if he played more
Sure.
in the fourth quarter, I feel like he would have gotten there. But I mean, I wrote about this over on SI.com, NBA Cavaliers. This after the preseason, Kenny, us as fans, Cavaliers team, they always know what they're going to get from Jared Allen, and it's so refreshing. You have these stars that go off for 40-point game, and then maybe they take a step back the next game. And I don't want to call it inconsistent, but it's just those explosive performances that we see
Sure.
from time to time from players, which is incredibly exciting to watch. But there's got to be something said for consistency. I mean, like you said, every time Jared Allen takes the floor, it's 14 points and 10 rebounds and elite defense. I
Yeah.
mean, It may not be the most flashy box score or the most flashy stat line, or the way he scores may not be, I don't want to say the most exciting, but he may not be, you know what I'm trying to say.
Sure. Yeah. No,
But
absolutely.
there's absolutely something to be said for his consistency. And I think that's going to be such an important role for him this year. Just go out there and be that consistent 14 points, 15 points, 9, 10 rebounds a game. Like you said, he didn't quite hit there last night. But I do think that has to do with, him not really playing in the fourth quarter, because the Cavs are up by 30, which I'd much rather have the Cavs be up by 30, than a possible Jared Allen double-double.
I'm anxious to see how I'll use the term evolves. I'm not sure if that's the right way to describe it, but I'm anxious to see what his offensive game looks like as the Cavaliers try to find different ways to utilize Evan Mobley, right? Because there's going to be that
Mhm.
emphasis of him being out at the 3-point line. There's going to be that emphasis of Evan bringing the ball up the floor at times. So that will inherently create more space in the lane around the basket for Jarrett to work. And man, it's really tough I mean, when you think about guys that are just elite around the rim, Jarrett comes to mind because he is such a
Yeah.
good finisher. We know, obviously, we talk about him as a rebounder, but that's just going to create more space for him to operate underneath the basket, which is where he's best.
Like you said, Evan Mobley with that outside shot's going to be important. And I think that when those two are on the floor together, and if you can see Mobley start to take those big strides with the outside shot, I think it starts with the pick and roll. That was something they did so much of in
Yeah.
that 2022-23 season,
Yep.
the inaugural season of the Avalanche. They were using that pick and roll so much. And I don't understand why it feels like they went away from it in the past years. I know personnel is one part of it, but I think it starts with that pick and roll with either Donovan is your main ball handler, Darius is your main ball handler, and then that gives them the option to alley-oop or pass it down to Allen, or kick it out to Mobley and let him work on, the outside, whether he drives or takes that shot as well. But I really hope we see more of that pick and roll. It worked so well for this group a couple of years ago. And like I said, I don't necessarily have stats to back it up right now, but I just feel like they went away from that at times the past few years, and it worked so well.
I think it's something that's certainly going to be part of their repertoire as they move forward, because you have guys like Jarrett and Evan who are so versatile, and then you have just dynamic ball handlers like Darius uh, and Donovan, obviously. And then when you mix that in with the emphasis on adding shooters like Max and George, I would imagine that will come around eventually. And that's what this whole experiment. And I don't even want to call it experiment, obviously, because they're moving forward with Kenny Atkinson, but that's something that we can look forward to and watch. There's going to be so many storylines as they evolve throughout the season. That's part of the 82 game ride, right? We're going to see how
Of
this goes
course.
and see what we tinker with throughout the season.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
We'll bring this up to a little bit of an not necessarily off topic, but off court talk. The Cavs are introducing their 24-25 Cavs Cup court. Tommy, you sent this to me a few minutes before we started on. Just another topic that we're going to touch on tonight. All 30 NBA teams will play on fully painted courts throughout the tournament, designed by a particular artist. The courts are going to be featuring, different designs. The Cavs obviously featuring their V-net logo and the wine and gold. I'll start you off with this because I know where I'm going to go with it. Are you a fan of the in-game or the in-season tournament, or the NBA Cup, I guess, as it's
Oh
being
boy.
dubbed now? But what are your thoughts on it? Because I'll let you go first, because I could probably talk for a while on this.
I don't dislike it. I think it's fine. It certainly doesn't I feel like I'm the type of fan that's just going to have an NBA game on throughout the season anyway. Like whether it's obviously the Cavs playing or whatever the TNT, ESPN game is, I'll have it on in the background. So for me as a fan, it doesn't really incentivize me to turn on a game, more than I would on a normal regular game day anyway. But I do think there's something to be said for maybe a casual fan who, and I think that maybe it was Adam Silver, someone mentioned this last year. I can't remember quite who it was, but they said the goal of the courts were to kind of send a message to that maybe casual fan who's maybe not as in touch with the every single day, every single game schedule, that, hey, this is an important game. This is a different game. This is something that you're going to want to watch because of this, different court, the Cavs Cup logo on it, or whatever it may be. So I do think that the in-season tournament has a place. I think it's a nice kind of thing, and to maybe draw in those fans. I don't think it's going to, and at least make me turn on a game because it's on, but I think it's kind of cool. Why not? It's November. It's an 82 game season until April. I mean, it doesn't hurt anything in my opinion, but I don't know. It just is.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you're right on. I think you're right on a couple levels. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think that it's, good to maybe try to draw in some, peripheral or your more casual fans. But I just feel like it's so. I don't know if gimmicky is the right word.
Oh no,
Maybe
it's
it's
gimmicky. That's for
like,
sure.
I just
For
feel like it's
sure.
kind of cringeworthy, or I don't, maybe cringeworthy isn't the right word, but there's something about it that there's something about it that I can get on board with. It's obviously going to make money, which in the end, I guess, is the point, and that's all that
Right.
should really matter. But there's just something about it that I'm just like, whatever. It's just kind of
Yeah.
like, trust me, you're. I mean, if you're taking the choice, obviously you're like, oh, I'd rather have success in the playoffs than in the in-season
Oh,
tournament
for
every time.
sure.
But
For
I guess
sure.
it is something nice to be, to play for, or to get
Mm-hmm.
amped up for throughout the 82 game season.
Last year, when I was talking with my dad about it, he's like, "It's harmless. It's just there. Yep, there's nothing wrong with it,
It's
like
kind
you
of like it
said."
is what it is,
Yeah,
right? Like,
right. It's there.
what the NBA is going to do. You know that this is kind of what it's there for. Um, enjoy the games, take it
Right.
what they're worth, and hope nobody gets hurt again.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right.
Um, as we wrap things up here, looking forward to Friday night and the Cavaliers getting back at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. We expect there to be a great crowd down there. What are you looking forward to most seeing from this team so far this year? Because I haven't had a chance to talk with you. I've been talking a lot with Spencer, been talking a lot with Brendan. Haven't had a chance to talk with you about like your expectations for this season. What you are looking forward to seeing the most throughout this season, and how this team grows. I feel like in years past we've talked about like a lot of Darius, a lot of Donovan, we're talking a lot of Evan here, which is, I think,
Yeah.
maybe good that the focus is on him, to allow Darius and Donovan to maybe kind of do their thing and continue to figure things out in the backcourt. But like, what are you anxious for so far this season?
I think I'm gonna try to stay away. Obviously, I'm excited for Mobley. I'm excited for the backcourt being like, especially Darius being healthy. I think that's massive. I don't want to downplay any of that. But I'm gonna try to go off, maybe a little more unique route. I'm excited to see what Dean Wade's gonna do.
Yeah,
So many people have talked about how he's like a secret weapon, an X factor. He is an underrated defender, absolutely. But Kenny's talked so much about how he needs to be more without the ball in his hands. A cutter, a screener. Same thing
yeah.
with Isaac Okoro. So I'll throw him in this kind of bunch as well. Like, what are these role players going to do when they don't have the ball in their hand that's going to help this offense take it to the next level? And like Kenny said, cutters, screeners, and just kind of adding that extra element to the offense that's going to make everyone's lives easier, including themselves, because they'll play all those extra little, things they can add can help make open shots for them as well. So I'll kind of clump them together. Dean Wade, Isaac Okoro, those defensive guys, but how are they going to kind of take that next step for the whole team and also themselves on offense?
Yeah, you talk about two guys that, like, it's interesting that you mentioned those two guys, because they complement each other well. Like I think of Isaac when we talk about Isaac's growth and development over the last couple of years. We've talked about him trying to evolve more as a shooter, right? We know what you're going to get defensively from him. He's kind of more of like an attack guy. And Dean, you know what you're going to get defensively from him, but more of like a spot up and shoot guy. So yeah, that's interesting. I was surprised. I don't want to say I was surprised. I think that's probably the wrong word, but it was interesting to see Dean get that start. And you wonder if that's going to be like a fluctuating piece here moving forward, depending on the matchups, or if he's going to be the piece and inserted into that lineup throughout the duration of Strus's injury.
Yeah, it certainly sounded like when Kenny was talking about it at the beginning of the week, or maybe over the weekend. I don't even know at this point, but he certainly made it seem like it was going to be a matchup based thing. But because I know that he also likes the idea of using Dean as like that stretch power forward, even center at times in a small ball lineup. And he talked about how, whoever is going to start in that small forward is going to affect the rest of the lineups, which I think is a great point for him to be, advertising. Like, look, like we got to think about just beyond this starting group. But I think he makes the most sense for him to start there, especially looking at who the Cavs are playing the first couple of weeks. It just makes the most sense. It's going to be him.
We'll leave you with that. Cavaliers 1-0 on the season. Big win on Wednesday night. They look to go 2-0 on Friday night when they host the Detroit Pistons at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. Of course, you can follow along with all of our written coverage over on the website, si.com/NBA/Cavaliers. We will have the pregame report up, the game day report up in the morning to preview that matchup between the Cavaliers and the Pistons. And of course, you will have Spencer Davies probably Spencer German chiming in on some of the coverage. We will have the pregame reports for you leading up to tip-off, and then, of course, our postgame report right here on the YouTube page as well. For John Rudder, for Tommy Wild, I almost said Brendan Gulick. I did that live once on a podcast at the Fieldhouse, and it is probably
not Brendan Gulick,
right,
unfortunately.
Appreciate you tuning in to watch the podcast here. Cavs and Detroit Pistons coming at you from Friday night at the Fieldhouse.